introduction to one of my favorite people on earth, Mr. Stephen Oliver, who is with the Advisor Marketing Podcast. Now, Stephen is a true maverick, and I mean that in every sense of the word. Not only in our business, but I have to tell you, his clients universally love him, and they grow at rates that they wouldn't believe it's possible. Now, on this podcast, in each episode, Stephen is joined by various members of his team or special guests to share insider secrets to rapid growth and high net profits in your financial advisory practice. So I just want you to know you're in for a wild ride, new information, and a lot of exciting new future because of Stephen Oliver.
Hey, for anybody who doesn't know, I'm Stephen Oliver, Financial Wealth Mastery, and I'm joined by Darcy. I don't even know how many different titles and positions to attribute to you. You are last person standing within the no BS corporate world. I think is one title. We've been working together, known each other now. I don't even know how long. I figured out I'd been in, what was lovingly referred to as Planet Dan, at least since the late 90s, probably. And you've been in those circles for a pretty comparable period of time, long time. Let's start with your background. How did you end up where you're at, and tell me a little bit more about what you do?
Yeah, the long-winded road to end up where I was. Like you probably also never thought this was what I was going to do, but I graduated college with a degree in Parks and Rec, as I tell people before that was a TV show.
Yep.
And realized very quickly that I really hated almost everything about what that was. And I wanted to make more money, and I wanted to do some stuff. And I actually started off in corporate, surprising, in Arthur Andersen and Andersen Consulting, and but started to figure out, how to be different. That I didn't want to do what everybody else did. And so while everybody else ran around in suits and ties, and I ran around in my sweats and had VPs quacking like ducks, but figured out I wasn't going to make a lot of money. Went on to manage a physical therapy center, a family-run physical therapy center. It's kind of the first time I saw how the entrepreneurial and like the family business works. But I ended up automating myself out of a job. So by Monday afternoon, there was nothing really left for me to do. And I'm not good at twiddling my thumbs and pretending to be busy. Yeah. So another friend of mine said he needed help, and it ended up he had an info marketing business. That's where I met you the first time, probably about early 2000s. Yeah. And little did I know that that's what I had jumped into, and I loved it. It was great because you could do something today and you could have results today. You could have an impact on people's lives and you could do something. And so that was about 7 to 10 years. And then an opportunity opened up. I jumped out on my own, and an opportunity opened up back at GKIC. And I didn't know how corporate it was going to go, but
yeah.
You had a chance to work with Dan, and you had a chance to work with great entrepreneurs. And so, yes, I've suffered through a lot and gotten to a place now where it is really where it should. I wish it had been, and it is a joy and really, really great to work with Russell and the team we have right now at Magnetic Marketing. So.
Yeah. So for anybody who doesn't know, GKIC was Bill Glazier and Dan Kennedy's company when Bill Glazier launched that with Dan, and then it went through several levels of venture. What's the right word? Not venture capital, but private capital ownership.
Private equity.
Yeah, private equity. That's the word I was looking for. That turned out from being disaster A to disaster B to disaster C, and now is recently purchased and being run very effectively, it seems, by Russell Brunson of ClickFunnels, who is a force of nature. I really enjoyed our time out there together in Boise. Pretty amazing operation they have.
Isn't it? Yeah. He's so much fun to work with. Just so energetic and so smart. It's been fun to learn with him.
It's an interesting tie. I didn't know. I didn't remember that was in your background. I had a tie to Andersen Consulting way back in the day as well. It was a branch manager of mine. His father's it may still be, probably retired at this point, Bill Ramser, with Andersen Consulting.
Okay.
And we were having great difficulty with staff development back when I was doing an MBA back in the 1999, 1998. And we did a lot of behind the scenes looking at the Anderson Consulting hiring practices, one thing or another. It was fascinating because the martial arts schools had the same problems that corporate America had with hiring tech people. The advantage of Anderson Consulting, Perot Systems, EDS, et cetera, was that they could create a career path for technical people, where the average company, all they did was kind of like you described earlier. They just end up working systems, legacy systems, maintenance, and all kinds of boring stuff. And I spent many hours probably with Bill Ramser talking about how Anderson hired people and so forth. And then on my during my MBA was actually in Germany. We were listening to HP and one thing or another talk about how they were ramping up East Germany, and it just all clicked to me of how all that came together for staff development, because that was the single biggest problem with, back when I was running a bunch of martial arts schools, is how do you ramp up a bunch of staff and create, especially when you have mostly kids as students. But that's fascinating. But for financial advisors, you've dealt with a bunch of them, and I don't think they're in their thinking about marketing much different than lawyers, accountants, CPAs, et cetera, who there's a predisposition, number one, that direct response marketing doesn't work. Predisposition number two, that all of their clientele is going to come from just cold, labor-intensive cold calling or cold contacting on LinkedIn or something like that. And then number two, through referrals. But even their referral systems tend to be, not much better than, sitting in front of a client and begging them for, give them a list of their friends. Is that a good description from your experience?
Excuse me. Yes, absolutely. But, if you think about it as a prospect or as somebody who's trying to find somebody to manage money and to plan for retirement and to do a lot of that stuff, the last thing I want to do is the person who's hitting me up on LinkedIn or, the cold calling and the rest of that stuff, because if you put yourself in their shoes, they're looking for, I was just actually writing about or correcting something today about this. And it's like, humans, we want to abdicate authority. We don't want to make decisions. We don't want to have those heavy things weighing on our shoulders, right? So we're looking for somebody that we can trust who will make good decisions for us. And I mean, who's in a better position to do that than the financial planners in that world, where it's like, yeah, look, I want to retire. I'm going to have money coming in. I work a corporate job. I've got a 401k, or I've got this stuff, right? And I just want to retire. And can you get me there? Right. And I doubt I'm going through a yellow pages being like, oh, that name sounds great. Let me call them.
Right.
So really everything we talk about in direct response and positioning and creating that trust base, creating everything that you do about having prospects learn to be able to trust you and choose you and do that and really come to you is so important to do that. And if you really even take the word marketing out of it, if that makes people feel icky or like, oh, I shouldn't have to do that, well, then don't do marketing, but do this stuff, right? Like, think about how you're being perceived. Think about what you want people to know about you and what you want people to say things about you, because even the referral-based stuff all comes down to that, right? Like, it's not just, I'm not just going to hand my, Rolodex off to somebody, but instead make it so that they want to recommend you and want to brag about you and want to, to refer people to you.
You bet. Yeah. The book I put together recently, that was actually one of the chapters. I found a great cartoon of the guru sitting on top of the mountain, but Dan's terminology, I think, is nobody seeks out the guru at the bottom of the mountain.
Right. Yeah.
You've got the personal positioning, and that's one of the things that I sound like a broken record with it sometimes, but these guys are all in the contest to be no different than anybody else. And it's, again, our mutual reference of Dan Kennedy is, the horses and the riding and the grumpiness and only accessible by fax and 19 other things that make him unique but perceived as valuable, the guru at the top of the mountain, difficult to access, and so forth. And it's something that doesn't come across, I think, as maybe intuitively obvious to advisors, is that you really have to develop a personality, position yourself as the expert, and position yourself as being in high demand rather than needy, and have people begging to want to do business with you rather than feeling like you knocked on their door and are begging for their business. Talk more about how to develop that kind of positioning.
Well, and even to back up a step from that, right? Like, give yourself permission that, like, look, we were wired, right, for protection and stuff, to not stick out, to be like everybody else, right, and to roam in a herd of people. So it's partially not your fault, right? But now that you know that, now you need to make a decision and say, okay, like, everything, the way I was programmed, everything I had learned previously was based on this. And now if you look at this other model and the way that people have success and do that, right? And like you said, so yeah, it's people want to hang around other successful people. Like, and if I want somebody to grow my money, I want somebody who has grown it for other people, who has success doing it. I don't want the guy who loses money all the time. Yeah. So, and if I'm your prospect, how do I know that? Right? What are the things that I always use what are the symbols that your prospect, your potential customer or client, what is successful? What does success look like to them? What symbols do people have who are successful, right? They've written books, they're published, right? They look a certain way, they act a certain way, they have an office that looks, I'm not going to meet with somebody who maybe, who doesn't have an office, or who has no background if I'm on a Zoom meeting, right? And so, like, all of that becomes really, really important, because it says if I just look at your background, right, I can see certificates, I can see pictures, I can see things, right, that while you're talking, I'm looking at that stuff and I'm already making a judgment about you. And that's what your prospects are doing. So please forgive my background. I'm stuck in a house right now with the only thing, but normally that's not what my background would look like, right? Because I've thought about that. What conclusions I want somebody to come to when they see that background, when they see things about me, when they meet with me for the first time. What are they presented with? What are they presented with prior to meeting with you? One of the terms that you and I use all the time, shock and awe boxes. And I was recently, the reason I'm stuck here in this is I'm remediating mold. And so I can't be in my office and I don't have access to all my stuff, but all I wanted when I was looking for that, one, was an expert, somebody to abdicate this. I've got mold. I need somebody to come get rid of it, make sure it's gone, right? Like, and everything is done right and all that kind of stuff, because I don't want to be sick anymore. And then the second thing I was looking for is I was looking for information. I was looking for not somebody to, like, lecture me or to hand me a pamphlet, right? Like, now that I know I have this problem, what do I need to know about it? Sure. Maybe I don't want you to tell me about all the different things, but I want to be able to read about them. I want to be able to see the difference between all the options you're giving me or that you're talking to me about. And so all I wanted was somebody to send me a shock and awe box with what I needed to know for mold, because that's something I have no idea about. And your prospects, you've been involved in financial planning for like your entire career. So this is second nature. This is stuff that you're like, oh, we have this. I know what that is. But to your prospect, they're at like a kindergarten level.
You bet.
They know none of it. They need all that help. And they're looking for somebody who can help them and stay in touch with them. Communication is such, most financial planners leave you hanging, and it's like, oh yeah, maybe it's like once a year I'm going to check in, or yep, everything looks good. Everything looks good. Year after year, why does it look good? Help me understand what I'm looking at. When am I going to know there's going to be a problem? Like, what should I be? Because otherwise, the other thing they do is they react.
Yeah.
What's on the news today? What's in the news tomorrow? The Dow drops. They react, and we get mad because they do that. But they do that because they don't know.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, and when the market goes crazy, unfortunately, most financial planners hide under the desk and hope their clients aren't going to call them, rather than proactively communicating effectively. We were talking offline a little bit about referral systems and what it takes to do that. And this is one of my biggest. One of my clients has a client list of 650, more or less. But the problem with his client list is many of them are people that he sold an annuity to, or he sold a life insurance policy to 3, 5, 7 years ago, and he hasn't communicated with them really since.
Yeah.
They've gotten, statements from the company, but I'm guessing of that 650, there's probably 100 that know his name.
Yeah.
And so it's let's talk about what you would do if you started from scratch with a clean slate and you've got an advisor and you wanted to build a system so that one, client satisfaction was going to be high, but number two, that they were going to be able to consistently generate referrals from their clients and their prospects.
Yeah. So once you have them, right? So I've got my client. So you need your client getting system, right?
Yeah.
And so once I've got them, you need your client nurturing and ongoing communication system. And I always like the word system because some people will send out a daily email. Some people will send out a monthly newsletter. Some people will send out a weekly email. To me, it's less about what time frame do I need to have this in other than the monthly newsletter, but what time frame do I need to have it in as at the beginning? What's the most important is really getting a system that's going to be consistent for you. So if that means every Monday morning, I'm just going to send my update, like here's what happened over the weekend, or here's where the markets stand, like reassurance with that and how you want to express that, whether that's you're going to get on a camera and you're going to go live and you're going to post it on your YouTube channel, or you're going to do all of those things, just give you a tool to be able to communicate on an ongoing basis. And so creating that pattern and creating what that's going to look like for you. Then the monthly newsletter, that's your opportunity to show up in their mailbox each and every month, right? And you want that to be printed, and that has to be at least monthly, because anything more than monthly and they've forgotten who you are.
Yeah.
So to prevent this, you start from day one of them being a customer. You have an onboarding, welcome to the family. You make a big deal out of it. You make them feel like they're special, that you reassure them that they chose the right place, right? That they're in the right hands. And then you have to constantly reassure them of those things, because if you don't, the doubt starts to creep in. And if, down the street in moves a new guy and he happens to be a financial planner and he starts talking about stuff and we have wine over there every Friday night, well, now guess who is that bug in the ear and who now becomes the expert, right? And he may be worse than you. He may be no better than you, but the only thing I know as a prospect is, hey, this is the guy who's happy to answer my questions, or who I see on an ongoing basis and I now trust. And so you want to prevent those things by creating that system to be able to show up on a consistent basis, so that you are always in front of them. That then gives you the launching pad for your referral system. Mm-hmm. And then, because in each one of those things, you constantly remind them. And if you just show up, it's like, oh, I was just having a conversation yesterday with Susie and John down the street, and they were complaining about something, and it was what you just wrote about in your email. And I'm going to forward that email to them. Yeah. Or I'm going to hand them a copy of that newsletter. Right. And now you can start that launching pad for a true referral system. And to me, the referral system is giving them the tools to be able to help somebody else.
Right. Giving the client the tool to help.
Yes.
Yes.
Instead of expecting them, like everybody else says, oh, a referral system, so then like send me referrals.
Yeah.
Well, now you've asked me, your client, to be your sales force.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to send them an email with a form that lets them put their friends' names in so that I can spam their friends.
Yeah. My friends are going to hate me. Like, who turned this over to them? Or like, well, Susie, client, you never refer anybody to us. Well, I tried, but then I've talked them out of it, or I've changed something, or I don't answer it the right way, right? I'm not a salesperson, let alone am I a financial salesperson. And so the best person to do that is you. So if you can provide them with the tools to hand to their neighbors and their friends and say, oh, you have that problem, or you're concerned, leaving a job, my financial planner's got a great book about the do's and don'ts of rolling over your 401k.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, Susie, my neighbor, can request that from Stephen, my financial planner, and boom, Susie can be on Stephen's list. Now you control the relationship, you control the process, right? And so now you can manage the sales process. And me, I look like the hero because Susie goes, oh my God, I would have made these mistakes and these mistakes. I'm so glad you told me about that book.
You bet. So let's break down a couple of things you said there. One is the monthly newsletter. And it's so fascinating how the world thinks that since you now have social media and you have email and so forth, that direct mail is dead.
Yep.
And, what I keep preaching is, well, the average person gets 200, 300 emails a day. Deliverability is a problem. All kinds of things are a problem, but they get 4 pieces of mail in their mailbox per day.
Okay.
And so, but the other thing that happens is nobody, and I'm sure there's exceptions, but when's the last time you had the perfect email? You were so excited about it, you printed it out and you put it under the magnet on the refrigerator, or you left it on your desk for when you needed that information, you pulled it up. Well, it almost never happens. What happens is, if I have a physical book, a physical newsletter, whatever it might be, even a postcard, it lays around my desk. I'll use books as coasters. I'll have it laying around, but it has life to it. It has impact to it. And even if it's an 8-page newsletter they didn't read, at least they saw it. Right. Where with the email, they're highly unlikely to even see it in most cases. It's not that email doesn't work, but it's one of those things that for some reason they're hesitant about that. And the other thing that I think they're hesitant about is, I was looking at the stuff that a couple of clients were sending out.
It's Lee Milt here, and I'm delighted to interrupt you today and let you know that I've been working with Stephen Oliver for 10 or 15 years now. He's a great guy. I love all the research that he does. And I just wanted to let you know that if you're enjoying the content on this podcast, then you really want to make time to visit advisorwealthmastery.com. And why should you do that? Well, because you're going to receive 2 of his great books, and actually one of mine called Success is an Inside Job. You'll also get a lot of absolutely free material on growing your practice through effective marketing. So again, take the time to go to advisorwealthmastery.com.
And it was so bad, but what they were doing in this case, it was, I think, Merrill Lynch, but it was just corporate gobbledygook put out by the corporate office. Yep. And it looked like it was written by ChatGPT after being screened through 5 lawyers and 2 compliance officers, and nobody that knew how to write to a human being, right?
Right.
And that's what they were sending out by email. I said to them, well, if you're afraid to put like information that you're afraid won't be compliant, hell, send them a postcard about your recent fishing trip or something. Give it some personality. Talk about that. I'm building in something that's going to get people to pay attention, and why it doesn't have to all be, relevant industry jargon, or why it shouldn't be.
Well, if we go back to the trust thing, right? Like, and you go back. So we humans, we trust for all the irrational and illogical reasons. So that's the hardest thing. And it's why, and think about it, like, walk through the rest of your day now going, oh, I did just do that, right? Like, if you have to choose a new landscaper, a new housekeeper, a new guy to fix your HVAC, right? And you have no other, you're trying to find somebody that you have affinity with. You're trying to find somebody who's like you. It's why you choose your neighbor, or you choose, somebody, at least, and that's why referrals, because at least it's somebody that somebody else knows.
Yeah.
And so personality and doing some of that, and then people don't care. I get so bored. Like, in your own world. So I've done a lot of work with dentists, and I used to say, nobody cares. Nobody wants to look at nasty teeth except dental people. Mm-hmm. So what they want to do in their newsletter is put a bunch of nasty teeth pictures. Like, let me show you this cavity and this big crack and everything. And at the end, I like, oh, I'm always like, oh, right. So that's not, what's a story that's going to grab my attention more? It's about the dog. It's about your grandchild. It's about the wedding, your daughter's wedding this past weekend. All those things, because I can find myself in there. I can be like, oh, we have that. It also gives them something to talk to you about.
Yeah.
Oh, hey, we both do martial arts. Oh my God. Or my son's now, I'm so excited because he's this belt, right? And they find something, and then you get excited and they get excited. And so, but nobody wants to know about the stock prices and the this and the that, and that's boring.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, like that's the thing with all the compliance stuff, right? Like I know other people in highly compliant industries. Fine, I can't write a book on my industry, but I can write a book on me.
Yeah, yeah. The dental example is a funny example. I actually had a dentist here in Denver, down in the by Cherry Creek Mall. I completely forgot his name, the name of the firm, everything else. I liked the guy. I was comfortable with him, but there was there was the twice a year appointment or once a year appointment, whatever it was, and I was on a plane somewhere and missed it, and then never could figure out who the heck it was from then on. There was no communication, there was no newsletter, there was no postcards, there wasn't even an email coming in, or if it was, it never got to me. And I actually ended up at a completely different place with somebody that probably wasn't as good for no other reason than I really couldn't remember who the hell they were.
You
right?
forgot.
Yeah, I totally spaced out what the name is. And with advisors, I think that we all think, I guess, no matter what specialty, but we all think that I did such a good job for them and we had a good relationship when we met 6 months ago. Of course, they're going to keep me top of mind when it comes to, interacting with a friend or having some other needs, or, maybe they didn't have much assets at the time and they came into an inheritance. Of course, I'm going to be top of mind. Well, not if you didn't arrive in their email box today and you don't have a couple copies of your newsletter and they have your calendar, or they have 5 other things sitting around their desk that you sent them. And a lot of that communication, as you're describing, it's one-to-many type of stuff. And I think advisors tend to think that, oh, you're saying I have to communicate with my list of 600 clients or 100 clients or whatever. I just don't have that much time to talk to them on the phone every week or every month or meet with them personally. It's like, no, well, why don't you have a video you send out? Why don't you have a webinar that you do? Why don't you have a Zoom meeting once a month that's an open Q&A? Why don't you have a client appreciation event? Talk more about that, of different ways to leverage their time.
Yeah, figuring out a way to stay in touch with them. Again, people just want communication, right? People want to know. Sometimes it's like status quo is status quo, but like when things are ebbing and flowing and changing. I remember one time I got one thing from my mortgage broker when the rates initially dropped, whatever that was, 12 years ago, right? So hopefully, like when it happens again, right, as the rate. So what is on everybody's mind? Gee, the rates, they just talked about the rates going down again, another 0.5% or 0.25%. Gee, I wonder if I should refinance.
Yeah.
Okay. So if my current mortgage broker isn't at least reassuring me that, hey, it hasn't gone down enough, like here's where you're at, it hasn't gone down enough to make it worthwhile yet, you should hold. Okay. Well, then the next mortgage broker who comes in and goes, rates went down, we can save you money. That client is now going over there because they're like, well, I want to save money, right? And they're looking at it. So this very smart, they only did it once. So I shouldn't call them very smart because they did it once. And I told them this was really smart. You should do it again. Yeah. And it was like a mini report card. And it was a way that they could quickly communicate with their entire list as to where they were at. Now, some of them, I assume it's like, hey, rate has changed enough, you should refinance. So now the only people calling are the ones that they've told like, hey, we should look at your stuff. So if you can figure out a way that you could quickly run through or calculate something or have a program like calculate this for you, kick it out, you could easily segment your list and send them to different types of communication with it. So that would be a very segmented way, right? We talked about the monthly newsletter. Yeah. Then you can do, and they can be fun events. A lot of people, and I think you've talked about this before, rent out movie theaters. Somebody else was just talking about it the other day with me, rent out a movie theater. And so you put on this little party or this thing, right? Costs $5,000, $6,000.
It doesn't cost that much.
Yeah, it doesn't even cost, well, maybe the person I was talking to was in California. It costs them that much, but to rent out the movie theater, to provide the snacks, to do all that. And you let people bring friends and family with them. Well, you've also now created a referral event.
Yeah.
Because I take my neighbors, all those people that you wanted the name and address from that I didn't want to give you have now said, oh, a movie ticket? Great. Yeah, we'll come along. right? And so now you can stay in front of them. So finding ways to kind of do that around Christmas, you can have people dropping off Secret Santa gifts, or, the trees where they sponsor somebody in the area, or just all these different ways that you can keep showing up in their mailbox. And it's not the same thing every single time, but you don't have to throw an event every month, right? You can do one a year, start with that. Offline, we were talking about, I had a financial planning friend who was and I saw him try to get through their compliance department, and it was, they wouldn't even let him do online. I was like, you have got to, because we must have gone through 3 checks because I couldn't write the check. And he joked one time, he's like, I'm going to send you to a check writing class. And I said, well, I'm going to send you to an online payments class. Cause it's much easier for me to, to do this. So anyway, so he took to the idea we're talking about with a customer appreciation event. And he would do it around Christmas time. And he started renting out real nice steakhouse and inviting his top clients in. And one year, I'm sitting at a table with all these people I don't know, and I'm listening to them talk. And it was a school district that had gone through a bunch of restructuring. So a lot of them had to roll over their, whatever their 401k version is. And they start talking, they're like, how do we get invited back to this next year? Mm-hmm. And she's like, this is really nice. Like this top wine, top steaks, like all this stuff. And one goes, well, I brought you and you brought her and she brought him. And I think if we bring new people to him, we get invited to this. Someone goes, well, I got to go find more people because I want to come back to this thing next year. Right. So I said to him, don't get up here. Don't do a dog and pony show. Like, just let this be about them. Right. He didn't listen on that part. And then it turned into the Merrill Lynch, well, let me give you the Merrill Lynch folder and the this, and this. But it goes back to our personality thing. Don't get up and talk about your kids, show pictures of the twins, the thing. And here's Christmas. And here's the kids we sponsored this year for Christmas. And we're making everybody's Christmas a better Christmas. And like all that's what that's what the people sitting at your dinner table care about. They don't care about your fancy corporate brochure and folder and all this stuff. And please don't ask them to put it on there, right? Like make this event be about them because they're figuring out. So they're coming to you and they're bringing people to you, or, is there another event that I can bring them with me? And then they can ask to have a conversation with you.
Yeah. And so what I found over the years, and the number of times we've rented out movie theaters, I couldn't keep track of that. We've probably done that 300 times or more, including preview screenings of big blockbusters. So we would work with the marketing agencies locally, and whatever the big one was, hit a couple weeks ahead of time. They do word of mouth screenings, but it's really cool. Would you like to see whatever it is, Raiders of the Lost Ark 2 weeks early, and you have an event. And by the way, those are free because they've rented out the theater. They give us all the tickets, and it didn't cost me a penny.
Even better.
But boil down what you're saying is I've always found referral are about events that they're excited to bring their friends to, and it could be a customer appreciation event. It could be an information, a webinar or a Zoom meeting or something like that. It could be something in your conference room. It could be something in a local hotel, but it could be social or it could be informational. And the more of those things you have, the better. One of my clients, he's with Northwestern Mutual, very successful. My friend Peter, he's actually how I got back into this niche, is working with him. But first thing I ask him is, well, what have you done for events and for client referrals and so forth? He said, oh, I have a friend who has an art gallery. We did a thing at the art gallery. It was really successful. I go, oh, great. Well, how often do you do that? And of course, the answer was he did it once.
Yeah.
And when's the last time you do that? It was like 6 years ago. It's like, well, okay, why didn't that become once a year? Right. And then we can overlay something. That can be the fall thing. You can have a spring thing. We could have some. And he goes, well, that was a lot of work. It's like, well, it's a lot of work the first time.
Right.
Once you have the checklist, and you know what it's going to be, and you got the venue lined up, my member meetings that we usually do them at the same hotel. Yep. And I basically talk to a sales rep and say, do the same menu, same schedule, same deal, same setup, just pull out the specs from last time. We're doing it again. But people don't think that way. But then you mentioned earlier, I think it was pass along tools. But having physical copies of your book, reports, white papers, things that your clients can pass along. And then the third thing I think is just being an interesting enough human being that they remember you and they want to talk about you, but being top of mind. So that's that constant communication. Before we run out of time, let's shift to front end lead generation and activity. I've got a great quote here. You've probably seen this one, but I'll share it. I really started digging in a lot to Ken Fisher when I saw him with Dan and Adam Whitty there at one of your events. You were probably instrumental in all that. But I think this is a great quote. Is he talked about when my firm started doing direct mail industry, experts said we were nuts. Ditto when we started internet direct marketing, couldn't work. Next nobody would respond to advertising like that. Next came print ads, TV. They all worked, which is part of how we built my firm. Almost everybody in the know thought we were daft. When we started doing it in other countries, they said maybe it'll work in America, but just not here. I thought that was a great one.
Yeah.
And I remember him saying, early on, he was afraid of all the big guys knocking him off. And they had already concluded that all the stuff he was doing so well wasn't going to work for them. For a business like a wealth manager, a financial advisor, or life sales, where would you start from a standpoint of let's say I don't have a big client base, and so I'm looking at developing new prospects in the pipeline, nurturing the relationship, creating expertise. Where would you start?
Well, so most of the time you're that high net worth individual, right? Yeah. If we're not looking for the 22-year-old who's at their first job, which I'm assuming we're not, all their money is not underneath the mattress or in the backyard. So they have somebody. Yeah. So you have a different hurdle. It's not just invest with me, but it's now walk away from. And you got to remember that the devil we know is sometimes better than the devil we don't know. So I might be frustrated, or it's just so laissez-faire, or things are fine. Right. But I've got this inkling in the back of my head that I feel like it could be more, right? Like, or I don't know, because he doesn't check in or she doesn't check in with me. And she always tells me we're good. So does that mean I was really good at picking things out, that we never had to change anything? Or do we just never change? Right. Like there's all these little inklings and stuff like that. So the first thing you got to do is you got to bubble up that problem that they think they have. You got to agitate it to the point where they're like, oh man, there might be something better, right? Now they're starting to look for something better. So now you have to differentiate. And in this world, like my favorite thing, and I hope it aligns with your clients, is a book, right? Because I think it's the best way you can show somebody who you are and your knowledge and your expertise and all this stuff, and give them things that maybe they didn't think about before, to then be able to say, okay, this guy or gal knows what they're doing. The one I'm with doesn't. I think I might be leaving money. It might be worth the headache and the trouble to move all my stuff over here. And if they have to make that easy for me, then man, this was the best slam dunk decision I made. Right. So it's thinking about the problems that they have. It's thinking about the frustrations or those seeds of doubt. And that's the message we want to give them. Right. We want them to just say maybe, just raise their hand and like request information from us, because now I've got a pool of people that have at least said, I might not like where my stuff is at. I might think that there's something better. And I would much rather fish in that pond. I call it like, we want to stock our pond. So I want to take all the fish out of the big ocean, and I want to get them to jump into my little pond. So when I want to go fishing, I'm in this tiny little pond, and it makes it much easier for me to catch a fish than if I try and do that into the big wide ocean. Yeah. So if I get them in there, right, then I can go start fishing from there. And now I can start pulling them out. Right. And having conversations with them. So the lead generation to me is having those conversations, having those messages, planting those seeds of doubt, agitating those seeds of doubt, and getting them to raise their hand. To one of my favorite lines is just say maybe. Yep. Right. You don't need to say yes. You don't need to make a commitment. I just say maybe. Just say this might be something. Right. Because if you can get your foot in the door, if you can get them just to crack the door instead of slam it in your face, you have a better shot of the next thing. And each little thing you do opens that door a little bit wider until they're like, please help me.
And by the way, a plug for your book. You did a great book on how to write a lead generation book. Well, what was the title of the book?
How to write a lead generation book in 7 days or less.
I was close. I was close.
Yeah.
There you go. There you
Thank
go.
you.
It's Lee Milt here, and I'm delighted to interrupt you today and let you know that I've been working with Stephen Oliver for 10 or 15 years now. He's a great guy. I love all the research that he does. And I just wanted to let you know that if you're enjoying the content on this podcast, then you really want to make time to visit advisorwealthmastery.com. And why should you do that? Well, because you're going to receive 2 of his great books and actually one of mine called Success is an Inside Job. You'll also get a lot of absolutely free material on growing your practice through effective marketing. So again, take the time to go to advisorwealthmastery.com.
And it's actually a much easier process than people think, right?
Right.
One, it doesn't have to be, the book I did recently is 350 pages, but it doesn't have to be that. It can be 40 or 50 pages, and you can talk it. Yes.
40 to 50 pages, or what I always say is, so it takes to get about 100 to 120 page book, it takes about 3 to 4 hours of talking.
Yeah.
And most people won't give you 3 to 4 hours to explain what you do, to showcase why you might be better, right? I'm not giving you 3 to 4 hours. You're lucky if I'm giving you 3 to 5 minutes.
Right.
But a book where they can sit down or on an airplane or do whatever, right? They can consume that, and they can read that book in more like 60 to 90 minutes.
Yeah.
And they can do it on their own time. And it does 2 things for you. There's a percentage of the people. See, we always think the world is always like us. And so if you're a reader, then you think everybody reads. If you're a video watcher, you think everybody watches video. But there's also a percentage of the world who's never going to open that book, but they've made their decision because you have a book with your name on it. So, gee, that's good enough for me. Yeah. There's the other side that is like, you know what? I'm going to read every single word of that book, and I'm going to make sure, and I'm going to check it against this, and I'm going to go against this, right? And we want both ends, and we want everybody in between. Some read 1 chapter, some read 3 chapters, right? The point is that it positions you as that guru on the top of the mountain. It says a lot without saying a lot, and it puts you in that position to be able to do that. But it also becomes one of your best sales tools, because it's the thing that allows you to talk for 3 to 4 hours that they won't give you if you don't do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Something else you said earlier on in this part of the conversation was about who you're going after, and think in terms of an avatar client and your ideal client. But there was extensive research done. I work a lot internally with Northwestern Mutual, and they're trying to launch, or are launching, what they call their private client group. So it's an attempt to go after ultra high net worth individuals. Yeah. Really, it's an attempt to keep their highest level producers and keep them from fleeing as fast as they're fleeing into RIAs. But their research showed, and I'm going to butcher the numbers a little bit, but more or less 60% of all people who are working with a financial advisor aren't particularly thrilled with their guy or gal. And of those, about 30% at any one time are thinking about leaving and looking for somebody else. So if you take those 2 numbers more or less right, is if close to 2/3 of everybody who has an advisor isn't thrilled with their advisor, there's no wonder that most of those people aren't getting a flood of referrals, right? Last thing I'm going to do is say, I got this guy, he's really mediocre. So if you want to try him out, maybe I can be embarrassed for you.
I don't really know if he actually makes some good money for me. Yeah. I don't know. Yeah.
I never hear from him. You know,
but you should totally call him.
Yeah. The irony at the bottom of it is there's very few people who actually change year over year. The client retention tends to be very high. But I analyze that in what you just said is the industry-wide marketing is so bad, and the communication and the language that's used is so poor that they're just not having an alternative pop up in front of them. Yep. Those are pretty stark numbers. Approximately 2/3 don't like their current person. 1/3 are thinking about leaving at any one time. That creates huge opportunity. And the other huge opportunity is, if you take kind of the typical target audience of an advisor, which is not necessarily a suggestion, but 50 to 60 with over $500,000 in assets approaching retirement age, because they all seem to be, that's who they're looking for. You could narrow it down a little bit, but if that's the target audience, there's a lot of those people now that are the industry term is robo-advisors, but they're now going into, doing it themselves, sort of online, or, all the do-it-yourself platforms. And there's lots of data on why they should be able to shift those people into working with a human being, but I very rarely see anybody use it.
Right.
Here's why what you're doing is the least effective. Here's why you could have much more peace of mind with somebody. I mean, and that calls out the title of the book, by the way, is, it's easy enough to get inside that conversation that they're having with themselves and target that. But staying on this line, so the book is, or other information is, the lead magnet is some reason for somebody to raise their hand. It's something to gift them, or it's a low cost item for them to get into your pipeline. You called it the small pond. The small pond being people who have some awareness of you, who have responded to an offer that you can then continue to educate until they're ready. What would you consider the sales cycle? This is something else I see that is really misunderstood. I was talking to an advisor recently, and he said to me, I almost laughed out loud. He said, well, if I get somebody and they're connected to me on LinkedIn and they don't respond to me within 30 days, I block them. I'm like,
yeah,
what? I had another one I was working with, and he had, bless him, he had really gotten where he was paying attention to online marketing, and he had crafted 30 messages for 30 days. And I said, well, what happens then? And his answer, of course, was, well, nothing. I stopped communicating. Obviously, they're not interested.
Right.
Let's talk about how that works.
Right. Well, let's see. So in the 30 days since I connected with you on LinkedIn, I found out I have mold in my house. I have to leave my house I've been in 4 different beds in the last 8 days. I haven't had my office. There was a week of vacation prior to that. And I mean, that's my 30 days.
Yeah.
You, Mr. Advisor, were not the top of my mind,
No.
right?
Or
Your world, right? Mr. Advisor, your world every day is about, I'm waiting on that person, right? But their world is all of this other stuff that is happening. And it's, 30 days is actually a really short period of time when that's not your life and your world. So, and again, if we go back to the fact that they're going to have to switch, and it's not easy. And now I have to make a decision. Am I going to pay somebody this much money? Because I'm struggling, because I could go do it myself. That's a lot of money to give somebody else. And I haven't seen a lot of results over here, right? So there's just all this stuff going on in their head. And some are ready to make a move right away. Some, I always call it the ace in the deck, right? So there's 4 aces in the deck. And we're just going to play a game where I flip over the cards, right? And if we hit the ace in the deck, well, you might get lucky. The first card I flip over is an ace, or it's the last 4 cards at the bottom of the pile.
Yeah.
I got to flip over 48 cards before we hit an ace. And so the ace being the sale, right? You don't know where that is. And that's why we never stop, right? We joke about it in our world that it's buy or die, but the fact is, you don't know when somebody's going to be ready. You don't know that tomorrow, they don't know that today everything's going great. And unfortunately, tomorrow they find out they inherited because they lost a family member. Well, they didn't have the money today. They weren't your client today, or your message today didn't resonate with them. And tomorrow I have this money and I don't know what to do with it. And so now I need somebody.
Yeah.
And so we never know when that's going to happen. And that's why we want to stay in touch, and the cost of staying in touch is so negligible to the value that you can get from somebody. And I'm sure if you surveyed some of your best clients, that they can easily come up with the people who it was 6 months, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years of hanging around. Like in our world, right? I hear all the time, well, I read a Dan Kennedy book, 10 years ago. And then I don't know, I stupidly put that on the shelf. Right. But then something happened. And so I pulled a book back out, and then I went and read all the books. And then I went to you, and then I signed up for membership. And then I said, you know what, I got to do the coaching program, and I got to do all this stuff. And they went from being nothing to being a high-end member, paying us a lot of money because of something that happened 10 years ago, because they hung around in this world and we stayed in front of them, and we constantly were showing up. So when they were ready, we were there.
Yeah, yeah. I did that with my own clients recently, and I don't know. We probably had 30 or 35 of them on a Zoom meeting, and just took a survey, and there may have been one or two newbies who I saw something, raised my hand, became a client, and I'm happy as a clam. And I'm not sure we even had any of those. We had 7 years, 5 years, 3 years. I was paying attention to you for a year and a half. One of the testimonials I love is the guy says, "Well, I saw your stuff. I thought you were an asshole. I was totally ignoring you. A year later, I pay attention to one thing you told me to do. I added 70,000 in revenue for something you told me for free, and thought maybe I should check you out." Well, there you go, right? It's just this ongoing drip, 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 drip. I have another one. Is one of our top clients now. He had bought my book, I don't know, 8 or 10 years ago, and then COVID hit, and he pulled it off the shelf and said, I got a crisis here. What I'm doing isn't working. Maybe this guy,
This thing I read a while ago.
Yeah. And so you got to drip on them. You got to communicate with them. You got to pretty much anybody we get as a new client, we can go through, of course, in Infusion, you can go through their tags.
Yep.
And they've always been to 4 webinars, 5 things. Yep. They opted into 4 different things. And finally, they got around to, sucking up the courage to move the next step.
I remember when I first got into this world, but it still happens today. We were talking again before we started about like the challenge, the online or a webinar, but we had somebody who listened, because it was the same webinar, listened to the webinar 4 times. And on the 4th one calls in or whatever, and is like, "Oh my God, that was the best webinar so far." I was like, yes, it was. It's literally the same webinar.
Same one, yeah.
Replay. But they were in a different place.
Yeah.
Each time they heard something different, right? Which we can't. I mean, someone can go back and listen to this podcast 5 times and hear something each time that they didn't hear the first time. And you always have to remember your clients, your prospective clients are the same way. So if we go all the way back to the shock and awe, to the materials and the preparation and all that kind of thing, and why you want a book and you want all those things, it's because right now that 30-minute, maybe hour that they've given you to have a conversation with you, you're spewing all this information to them to try and sell them and choosing you. And they probably have already forgotten, either they've forgotten the first thing you told them, they can't remember, or they remember one of the things, but not the 7, right? And it's all new to them. So they have to hear it numerous times. So when they hear it from you, when they read it in your book, when it's in your reports, when it's in your shock and awe, when it's in your drip email, when it's in your newsletters, that's the 17th time now they've heard it. And so when we've got that stuff automated and we've got it as a system in the drip thing, what it's doing though is constantly selling them that you are the right decision, that you are the choice for them. And so what doesn't feel like a long sales process, because you may have only had to have 1 or 2 conversations with them, but your marketing did the heavy lifting and had 17 touches with them, all specifically selling them that you are the right choice. So now you had 19 touches, not 2.
Yeah. Or 32 or 82 or whatever, whatever it takes. And I remember the thing about watching the same webinar over and over again years ago now, long before I ever heard the term shock and awe package. It's a strange story, but I got a package from Porsche, and I have a 911 turbo, and so when they released the what's it called, the Cayenne, the SUV, what they thought their target audience was is everybody who owns a 911, also had a Jeep or something that they drove in the winter. So that's what they thought was their target audience. Of course, by far it became their best-selling product line. But they sent out this beautiful package, and it had, this is how old it was, a VHS tape, a gold certificate for a free test drive, and they had this whole like Jeep-ish type of thing set up for the deal, but this beautiful package. And then I saw this Adam Sandler movie, but it was one of these things where it had like 2 or 3 DVDs, you folded it out. So I did this package, and it was a DVD, a CD, and a written booklet, but the content was exactly the same in all 3. It was just one was delivered as a DVD, the other was delivered, it was all in the same package. And people kept saying to me, why do you have all the same stuff in all 3? It's like, well, I know and this was for for the kids market. If it goes home with a family, the kid may look at none of it. The dad may put the CD in the car and listen to it in the car.
Yep.
Mom and the kid sits down and reads the DVD. Maybe one of them is a reader and they read through it. But not a single person ever came and said, "Why did you give me the same content in 3 different ways?" Right.
Right.
It just never dawns on people that what they heard is the same as what they saw, is the same as what they read, even if they bothered to go through all 3, which very few people do.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can imagine the number of years I've had that argument of why do we have to send it out in all 3 formats? Usually it's around a table. It happened to usually be in the corporate era, the board room. So there's a board table, and it was like, because you read, you watch a DVD, and you have a CD, but I have no way of knowing that when you just give me a name and an email and a mailing address.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Well, and nowadays you can overlay, you drip them by text message, a link to a video, and you drip them by email, a link to the video, and you still send them as a DVD. And that's the other thing I think is crazy to me. An advisor whose median age of a new client is, say, 58, wants to do everything purely online and digital. It's like, well, they might actually have a CD player. They might actually have a DVD. They might actually still read stuff that's longer than a half a paragraph. Why are you afraid to send that? Well, nobody does that anymore. Well, who's nobody, right?
My response is, it is the best. I can put a business card side or a Post-it note, right, that says, go to watch this online, or I can use the DVD as my postcard.
Yeah.
Because now on the DVD, I print the same instructions I want them to have. So fine, you don't have a DVD player, you don't have a CD player, no problem. But you know what a CD is. Still know what a CD is. I mean, the kids nowadays, have you seen that the digital kids nowadays? I feel old.
Right.
They want digital, the throwaway film cameras.
Yeah.
Are back.
Yeah.
And I asked my niece, I was like, so what do you do with it? Where do you get the film developed?
Yeah.
Well,
the other thing is back to those old Polaroids with the instant development.
But at least then it's like it's similar to a cell phone. Like you see the picture, but they're out there taking pictures on film cameras now that they want to go drop the film off and have it developed.
Yeah. Well, and the best-selling medium for music now is vinyl.
Yep.
Yeah. CDs have been replaced by streaming, but vinyl is making a huge comeback.
Yep.
Isn't that funny?
Yeah.
So, hey, God, we've been going a bit over our planned time anyway, but we've hit a lot of subjects. What haven't we hit that an advisor really should know about ramping their business up with a direct response focus?
I mean, we mentioned it, right? Like, okay, so for me, it's always about understanding the big areas that for direct response, understanding who your customer is, because that is going to drive everything you do. So the clearer you can get, I just had a coaching call this morning, and one of my first one, he comes on, he says, okay, I listened to you. I went back and I looked at my list. And I looked at who they are and what they were. And so then he gave me the avatar, and I said, well, what were the biggest things that stuck out? Like, what did you not think? Right. And his was that it was the husband who was making the decision. He goes, I thought it was the wife. I sent him back with more work to do, because I said, now, are you sure that it's the husband who is getting the postcard in the mail? Or is it still the wife who hands it to the husband who says, now go call this? It's in your wheelhouse, not mine, but this is what we need.
Yeah.
Right. Because that changes the message on the postcard.
You bet.
And so when that isn't working, so the answer for almost any problem usually comes back to, well, who's your who, and what is it that they are worried about? And they are, because that gives you your message, that gives you everything. Right. So we have a who it's going to be. Then we craft the story that we're going to tell to them that is going to have them choosing us. And then the third piece is having a system. Everything becomes a system. So we have an attraction system to attract people's attention, to put them in our pond. We have a fishing system to go get them out of our pond and to become a client, right? And then we have a retention and a referral system. Yeah. And if you really focus on those are the big things for your business, everything else falls under that and aligns with it. And before you know it, you will have a direct response kind of machine built that takes away your worries and brings the right customer to you all the time.
Yeah. And going back to the avatar, I find that they don't want to narrow it down enough.
Yeah.
Right. Is, I mean, if nothing else, what are your hobbies? Who do you have an affinity with? Or, who's the biggest employer in your area? Or what professional niche would you like to target? And the problem with trying to have something for everybody is you're nothing to nobody, right? Whatever the right, more articulate way is of saying that is, it to me, it seems so important to really narrow it down, even if you create multiple marketing campaigns at very narrow targeted audiences, but always rifle shotting rather than trying to shotgun across.
Oh yeah, you'll have so much more success. And you can find, you find the biggest employer in town and you might never have to go anyplace else. But guess what happens? You speak their language. You know their people inside and out. You know their systems and their processes and what's going to happen. And you can make, like I said before, make it easy for them, right? Like people don't want more work on their plate. They want to find an expert. They want to find somebody who will abdicate that responsibility to and take care of everything. And treat your customers right, treat your clients right, and do that. And you'll have a never ending supply of them.
Well, there you go. There you go. Darcy, this has been great. What should they do to follow up and learn more on your end? We mentioned your book, but where else would you like to have them visit if the...
I'd drive them to Magnetic Marketing, magneticmarketing.com, right? You want to go, what we've both learned from what we've done with all of this. And if they like a book, you can grab Magnetic Marketing on Amazon. And it's a great place to get started, and they'll probably find a lot of alignment with the way you teach as well. And
oh, absolutely. And the the new Magnetic Marketing site, I mean, it gives you an access to all the podcasts and to the blogs and to all kinds of free content, to the 5-day free challenge that we did in Boise recently, et cetera. There's so much great content there. Unlike some of the old iterations.
Yes. There's a plethora. It's an amazing podcast. If you're a podcast listener, there's something for everybody.
There you go. Well, thank you very much. This has been great. I'm sure everybody got a huge amount of value out of it.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
You bet.